The Dacians. The Dacians were a tribal people who had migrated from the northern Balkans, eventually settling into the ancient area known as Thrace, or modern-day Romania. They were an amalgam of several groups of people, ranging from the ancient Greek world to ancient Persia. The tribes came together, either pushing out the ancient Celts or absorbing them, and settled in the basin stretching from the Black Sea to modern-day Slovakia. Although they would later be considered barbarians by the Romans, they were relatively sophisticated, owing most likely to their experiences with the Greeks and Persians. The Dacians developed a distinct social hierarchy divided between the rich and poor. The wealthy were the important contributors in the society, responsible for the governance of the kingdom, for trade, and with organizing the defense of the Dacian territories. The poor were the workers, the ones farming the fields and working the mines that searched for silver, gold, iron, and other precious minerals. They would also play the role of foot soldiers if their territory fell under attack. The cities were typically situated atop a rising hill, giving them a commanding view of the lands. These settlements were also walled for extra protection against raids from other kingdoms or other Dacian tribes. The outlying villages that sprung up, however, would be relatively unprotected, as most of that land would be reserved for farming the grains and livestock needed to feed the Dacian people. Because it was relatively landlocked, most of Dacia's wealth came from the earth, or what could be extracted from it. It did not have the benefit of coastal trading cities, or well-constructed roads that could facilitate trade. It had an abundance of lumber that could be harvested, especially near the mountains. Those mountains contained rich deposits of natural minerals that were sought after by many. The Dacians simply didn't have an expedient way to distribute them to neighboring civilizations. Militarily, they never developed a navy. Economically, they never developed a merchant fleet. Dacia would never experience the cash flow that Rome would. Because they were spread out over such a wide space, the Dacian tribes tended to act as separate entities and would often fight among themselves for supremacy in the region. It was a cycle that would continue for generations, until one notable king was able to rise to power and unite all the Dacian tribes into a single entity. That leader was Burebista, a charismatic individual and a wise tactician. He was able to unify the many Dacian tribes under one common banner. Burebista constructed a series of stone forts to safeguard the realm. The most notable of these forts were found at Kostesti, Blidaru, Piatra, Roshi, and Banita. With his territory protected, Burebista was able to turn his attention onto his neighbors. He led several campaigns against the neighboring tribes. He had subjugated the Getae, Celts, in the region, and merged them with his Dacians. He even marched his armies into the Roman frontier, attacking Roman outposts in Thrace, Macedonia, and the Illyrian Peninsula. This would cause the name of the Dacians to reach Roman ears. The Roman historian Strabo wrote that the Dacians could field an army of over 200,000 men. In ancient times, this was a staggering number, and it caused the Romans a fair amount of fear to know that a powerful barbarian tribe was situated on their border. Burebista had risen to power around the same time that Julius Caesar was conquering the Gauls. He had unified the tribes before Caesar became dictator. The Dacians were emerging as a threat. During the Roman Civil War between Julius Caesar and Pompey Magnus, Burebista did something very unexpected for a barbarian and non-Roman. He picked a side. Using his name, reputation, and the threat of his Dacian hordes, Burebista backed Pompey in the struggle for power in Rome. He did this because Pompey was the wise choice. He could field a larger army than Caesar. He had won fame and notoriety in several Roman conflicts, most recently against the pirates plundering the Mediterranean. If Burebista pledged his support to the victor in the Roman Civil War, it could become a stepping stone for Roman-Dacian relations. Unfortunately for both, Julius Caesar emerged the victor. His recent military glory gained in Gaul, the way he distributed money to the populace, and his elite legions of experienced soldiers gave Caesar the upper hand he needed to triumph over his adversary. Pompey had lost the struggle for power in Rome, and therefore lost his life. More importantly for Dacia, Burebista's support for Pompey brought Dacia into Caesar's crosshairs. As he consolidated his power and became dictator of Rome, Caesar began planning his campaign against the Dacians. In part, it was to punish Burebista for his support of Pompey. He also wanted to invade Dacia to flood Rome with more conquered wealth, and Dacia was known for its deposits of gold and precious metals. They were also a sizable threat, a barbarian horde that had attacked Roman outposts on several occasions. They would have to be dealt with. Unfortunately for Caesar, he will be assassinated by a group of Roman senators during a meeting of the Senate at the Theater of Pompey in Rome. His planning against Dacia came to an end as the assassins moved to legitimize their positions and fix what Caesar had broken in Rome. For a moment, it seemed like Dacia had been spared the executioner's blade and that Burebista could relax. But a palace coup led by the tribal aristocracy resulted in Burebista's death. The unifier of the tribes was dead. It would only be a matter of time before Rome's eye turned once more to the Dacian frontier. Following the death of Burebista, the centralization of the Dacian state collapsed. One nation disintegrated into 5 minor kingdoms, once again, all vying for supremacy in the region. This internal strife severely weakened the Dacian realm. Their views were focused not on the frontiers, but within. Their armies were arrayed not against the enemy, but against each other. A loose alliance still existed, but with nowhere near the authority Burebista had commanded. Luckily for Dacia, the Roman eye had shifted from the barbarian kingdom in the wake of the assassination of Julius Caesar. Preoccupied with the following struggle for power in Rome, the Romans had more to worry about than launching an expedition against the forces that had supported Pompey once. Future conquests would have to wait. Strabo, who once commented on the Dacians' ability to field over 200,000 men, later commented on their diminished power in the wake of Burebista's death. He wrote that in the years following, they could only field an army of around 40,000 men. Though very much smaller, this number was still sufficient to lead the occasional border raid on the Roman provinces in Moesia and Polonia. To the Romans, the Dacians had come to be seen as a nuisance rather than a threat. In fact, the Emperor Augustus offered to marry his daughter off to the child of King Cotiso of Dacia as a way to bring the Dacians into the fold. Ultimately, this did not have the effect Augustus had hoped, and the Dacians continued their practice of raiding Roman towns. Punitive expeditions against the Dacians would be mounted by the local Roman governors, but no war of conquest was being organized. That plan had fallen apart with the death of Caesar.